The role of the artist is that of the soldier of the revolution. Diego Rivera.
The struggle of anti-imperialism, or the struggle of like against the genocide, or the struggle against colonialism, is the struggle of the workers. And so how do we as artists or designers or um for DJs or proofreaders or writers or performance artists or whatever, how do we situate ourselves in that struggle as workers as well? What do we owe each other?
Hey everyone, and welcome to Artists Like Us, where we explore the creative journeys of those that you might pass by every day. Your neighbor, your coworker, your best friend, we're here to shine a light on the artists among us, the ones balancing their passions with sometimes pleasant and often harsh realities of life. I'm your host, Janita Richards, and together we'll dive into the stories, struggles, and successes of the creative souls who may not be household names, but who make our world more vibrant. Let's discover the artistry that surrounds us with the artists like us. And today, the artist like us that I have on is Aziza. Aziza is a freelance illustrator, graphic designer, and also calls herself an art worker. Aziza, how are you?
Hi. I good. I hate how you made me just sound so regular, degular instead of the superstar that I am. Just someone amongst us, someone you would pass on the street. I don't think so.
Oh, she's a girl with bangs and glasses. Could she be an artist?
I am a household name. What do you mean? In my household.
That's very true. I should take that part out. You are so far from regular. So, Aziza, I need to explain how you are one of my first internet friends. We've been friends on the internet since like we were 12. I always just use the word 12 or the number 12.
Yeah.
It feels fine to say.
Yeah.
And for reference, I'm 30. So, someone do the math.
Yeah. And I was 13 when I was on the internet, so that makes complete sense because now I'm 31. Crazy.
Aziza, I'm so happy that you could join us all the way from Berlin.
Yeah. I'm so happy to join all the way from Berlin. I'm so surprised the internet is working well.
Is that like a common thing that the internet does not work that well over there?
Yeah, I think in Germany in general, the internet kind of sucks.
Interesting. You wouldn't
Yeah.
expect that because they seem so efficient.
This is going to be a Germany slander episode. So just preparing already by throwing the internet in.
Okay, well, that's good because I mean, your journey has taken you through multiple countries now. You've gone from Pakistan to the US and then Stockholm and Berlin. I don't know why I said Stockholm like that, but so I mean, tell me more about that. I mean, you have this Berlin slander, but you've been through many places.
Yeah, and to be honest, yeah, I have slander for all of them. Was born and raised in Pakistan, in Karachi, the best city. And I was there for basically all my life. And then I left to do my master's in 2019, and I went to Sweden. I went to Stockholm. Um, at a perfect time because then in 2020 we had lockdown, but Sweden was the one country that didn't have a lockdown. So I experienced a beautiful Swedish summer outdoors in all of the little Swedish fields all by myself.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then I did my master's. Then I stayed for an extra year on a job finding visa. And I didn't find a job because the only places to work at that I could see in Stockholm were like Spotify or Klarna or something. But then in that time, I was working for a publisher in Berlin. I was working with a publisher in Berlin because I was doing a book that this publisher was publishing. And this job I got through someone that I knew from Karachi who was now collaborating with these Berlin artists on this full project that had a book as part of the project. And then they needed a designer. So I came up as the designer. And then I was working with this publisher. And then I visited Berlin for a residency with the publisher. And then while I was in Berlin, it seemed like this could be the next place I could move to because Berlin has, in fact, Germany has this. artist visa or freelance visa system that I could apply for, which is unusual, at least for me, because it doesn't require the backing of an institution, which is usually how I would get a visa, is because a school supports me or a job or like a business supports me. But here you kind of apply with your portfolio and like these like letters of intent of people who want to work with you. So I just applied for this freelancer visa, and then I moved to Berlin before I even got the visa, because the way that it works is you have to actually be living here before you can apply for that
Mm.
visa. So I already moved to Berlin and then I applied for the visa, and it was a harrowing process, but I got it for 2 years and now I have to renew it this year. So,
So
and I'm
you've
excited.
been you've been through quite a few twists and turns since you went to school for art. I imagine you grew up doing art, probably always knew you wanted to be an artist. Am I correct in assuming that?
No. So I really didn't want to be an artist. In fact, I'm told that when I was a kid, I used to say, everyone thought and would say like, "Oh, Aziza's going to be an artist," and I would say like, "No, I don't want to be an artist because nobody cares about artists until they're
Oh,
dead." I think someone fed that line to me as a child, because I don't think I came up with that.
well, I
That's what
feel
I
like
would
that was
say.
almost a not common, but you hear about what's his name?
Like
God,
Van Gogh,
Leonardo da yeah, Van Gogh. That's what I was like. God, this ear, and who
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Leonardo DiCaprio, who didn't really gain any notoriety until after he had passed. He had no idea
Yeah.
about the impact of his works. Um,
Yeah, but I think also, I mean, I've given up on that idea of being known for your work. I know I started off by saying I'm a superstar, regular regular, but I think it's fine. I actually think
totally.
less people should be known for things. It would be. I didn't think that I wanted to be an artist, and but then when I was going to for my bachelor's degree, when I was going to college, I thought I would do film.
Mm.
Um, and then as soon as I got in, and I think I had my first film class, and I was like, oh my God, I have to work with other people. And then I don't want to do that anymore. It's so hard. You are dependent on so many people to do a film. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And I can't work like that. So then I started doing this instead, which is this being freelance illustration and design.
So, going into freelance illustration and design, did you study that in undergrad? And then
Yes.
did you go in with the mindset that you wanted to be working in the capacity that you are, or did you think that you would be making art for art's sake?
Mm, No, when I was studying this, I had no idea what I would really end up doing. And I started freelancing from my first semester in my undergrad. And it was also really just like by chance. And it was also maybe like it really went like I don't know, it's been really roller coaster vibes. Really not an original expression at all, but or maybe it's more of a like there was a high and then there's been a real big dip, and then now I'm like climbing my way back up, because my
You mean a
first
roller
project in
coaster?
my maybe, but you don't start off high in a roller coaster. You actually start off at the bottom
This is true.
most of them. But it's because my first thing that I did in my undergrad, my first ever freelance job, which I wasn't paid for, by the way, I got exposure for it, was with Weiss. And then after that, I was just doing random things. And then I graduated, and then I worked in an ad agency, because in Pakistan there isn't so much you can do with this degree.
Mhm.
Um, or at least I don't know if it's changed so much actually, but it's like you can either work with some kind of cultural institution, which probably can't pay very well, or you can work in some kind of ad agency, which is what I did, but it's really like soul sucking, horrible work for me, at least. Then, or you can work with a startup, which is also what I did afterwards, which was an education startup. And then, I don't know, I was just looking for something else to do. And yeah, so at the same time, I was doing a lot of freelance stuff as well. So while I was doing working at the ad agency, that was my day job, and even the startup was my day job. And I used to run home from work to do more work, and the more work would be doing a lot of publication design for galleries. in Karachi. So that was the work that I was doing that actually has then carried me to this point, because the design I do is for art publications mostly. And then I also designed with like a independent publisher in Karachi that opened up while I was there. So yeah, it's all been freelance work. And I never thought I would be doing art for art's sake, just because also the the education I had, and even like just the way I am, or the way that I've been making stuff is usually for something. I haven't been making stuff for myself so much. So yeah, I wasn't expecting that I would be like out here just producing stuff for the sake of it.
I'm curious how you managed to develop your own personal style if from the beginning you'd always been working with people and
Yeah.
juggling those demands.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing about working with I think the great thing about this place that I was in after undergrad, which is working with an ad agency and then freelancing for these galleries, was that the ad agency obviously already had strict guidelines on how to produce stuff for each of the clients. So there was no brain power needed at all. I was just plugging stuff into pre-made templates or producing a template, but like I hated doing that and they would never select my template anyway, so it didn't matter. Like that job, it was such a cushy, wonderful job to have as a first job, because I would go in, switch off my brain, work until 6, and I think at 6 sharp they were like, go home. They wouldn't even want you to stay overtime, which was incredible. And then for my freelance work, the galleries wouldn't really have a say, because it's also kind of, they don't really care also about I mean, they care about the publication, but they just want it to look good. And if you could just make it look good, like they didn't have much say in like, oh, you should use this font, or you should try, I don't know, this color or something. They're pretty open about it and trusting. I don't know if it was trusting. I think they just didn't care as much or have as many opinions about. I think galleries also are so bad in terms of design. They have no
Yeah.
understanding of design. So they just didn't even try. So it was great that I wasn't really like fighting clients at any time to get anything done. I was just doing my stuff and then people would be okay with it. Um, yeah. But I don't think I have a personal style actually. I mean, I think everybody does
You
have a
don't think
personal
so?
style.
I feel like your work is really distinct.
Yeah, I think I'm catching this more from other people. And I think this is like a common sentiment that people have, where like a lot of people who work in, I don't know, I think a lot of people do have a specific style and then they'll talk about their personal style. But I do also think that there is a number of people who will say, oh, I don't really have a personal style. And then from the outside, you can really see it. But like, I really can't see my personal style. I feel like
Mm.
I kind of just adapt to whatever is needed. And I don't feel super committed to a certain kind of style. Over time, in illustration in particular, I've kind of gotten a style. Um, but yeah, I still don't feel like super committed to it or anything. And I feel like that can also change in terms of what's needed.
That's really interesting that you feel like you don't have one, but you can recognize that other people feel that you do have one. Because when I see, and maybe this is more the illustration work, because when I see things that you've done and you post about, I'm like, that's so Z's, like that's so Z's. Like I know, I feel like if I reached out to you to do something, I would expect something in the style that I think in my head you do. And if you veered away from that, I would be confused.
Yeah, I think it's also for me, the idea of personal style can also be kind of confusing because I don't see it. And then sometimes people will send me something and be like, oh my God, did you do this? And it looks like nothing I would ever do. And I'm almost offended, like, wait, that's how you see my work? But then that's kind of the point. Is if I don't see a style and other people do perceive something, I just have to accept their perception of it. For design, I guess I do have a style figured out because there are so many limitations in the kind of production that is available for arts and for the work that I do. Like a lot of times we're printing stuff in single color or maybe two colors. It can have only certain kinds of binding and stuff. Like I don't work on super, super big monograph projects. I do more like decolonial feminist projects. Like those things don't have a budget
Uh-huh.
necessarily. So I am my work is more suited to like producing on a smaller budget and making something look good with like limited resources, which I think is really great because I think if you give people too much free reign, it's also just like that's where something ugly is so easy to produce. Sorry.
Can you talk a little bit more about a budget? Because what I'm thinking is the budget is Adobe Illustrator. Oh. So when you're talking about budget, what do you mean?
The budget would be like what I would be paid as a designer, but also what we would need to produce some things. If for example, even if I talk about not working with a publisher necessarily, but working on a project, that is like recently I worked with Women in Exile, which is a self-organized group of refugee women in Germany, in Berlin. And they have been active for like over 20 years.
Wow.
And yeah, and they're a really cool organization. And this year they had a festival, and I worked with another artist, Susa, and then one of the people from Women in Exile who's been working on their archive, Sarah, and we put together like an archive exhibition where we took parts of Women in Exile's archive, and then we created a narrative or an idea that we wanted to showcase it with, and then we had like a structure at the festival that had these like pictures from their archive printed out and like newspaper articles, and then we also produced a zine that had some old images and stuff, and then old speeches that they've done at different demonstrations, like an 8th of March demonstration where they had a speech, and then another one, and then also new like interviews and stuff, and like transcribe those and put those in a zine as like, because a thing with a lot of like organizations that do work in like activist organizations, it's that there's not so much the work of archiving always gets pushed to the side. Like you're so involved in responding to urgent matters that the actual archiving of what you've done is not considered as important, or it is considered, but there aren't enough resources to do it. So now back to the budget question of it. There was a budget for the production of this archive, and then from that budget, there's also like a budget for to pay us, the people working on it. Um, and I don't know, there's no Illustrator budget in that, like Adobe Illustrator budget. There's no Adobe budget in that. It's more like an hourly budget of like how many hours it would take me to like artistic direct and graphic design for this project. And then that includes like the work of interviewing people, also transcribing, laying it out, then going to the printer, printing it out, the transport of maybe bringing it back from the printer, the structure that we put up that we had built by two artists, and then the like printouts that we did to put on the structure, the renting of like technical equipment, because we showed films also from their archive. So all of that is included in the budget. And there isn't so much budget because if it's a organization of refugee women who have like now, especially in current fascist times, like gathered enough funding to have a festival, there isn't so much money for producing the structure of their archive. They also want to do things in the moment and have so many workshops. And they invited people from outside of Germany, outside of Europe, and paid for their visas and their travel and sleeping, blah, blah, blah. So there isn't so much money. But that's where the budgeting comes in.
And so when you are having these conversations with producers, are they, I mean, I guess it's probably a mixture of both. Are they putting limits on you, or are you putting limits on you? Like, are you also thinking about the production aspect when you're going and choosing colors and choosing how big things are and fonts and stuff?
No, no, it's definitely, I think over time, I've really understood it doesn't need to be someone else putting the limit on me, but like and I've learned this a lot, especially working, for example, with like Suza was mentioning, but like working with certain people, I've really understood that it's about already understanding how best to use the budget. So that's also how best to make sure that we get paid adequately and we don't overpromise something.
Uh,
And then to make sure that what we are promising is something that is achievable in the best way possible, in the most expansive way possible, in a way that does reach an adequate number of people, or does have, like, it's not like we say, if we get a budget, we don't want to, if there's a print budget of like 1,000 euros, we don't want to make it so that there's like 12 copies of a full color book that get printed, right? It's better to have like maybe 1,000 copies of a zine. Maybe not 1,000. I don't think you can do 1,000 but like a maybe like 500. I don't know, 200. But make sure that you can do as much as possible, and then that would mean, yeah, let's do it one color. Let's do it at the copy shop so that we, because there's not enough time to go to maybe like a Rezo printer or maybe an offset printer. So let's do it at the copy shop. And then let's produce like a greater number of things in a shorter period of time. Because I think the budget is not just a budget of money, but also the lack of time there is to get everything done most of the time as well. So a lot of the restrictions, I guess, which I'm saying in terms of design is also part of the style that I have, is also putting the restrictions for yourself.
so your style is, I guess, partly influenced by not having money
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
produce something bigger. So I am really curious as well. You're working with these organizations that don't have a lot of money, but they do have, or we hope that they have big impact on the people that are less, not less fortunate is the right word, but you're talking about like refugees and women who are displaced and things like that.
Yeah.
And your first ever job, you were saying, was with Vice, which is was
Yeah.
or at least was once known as a really major publication for things that were out of the box and pushing boundaries. And I wonder if you're if you started out seeking out this work and now it's just kind of rolling with it and how it comes, or if you've just been presented like this and have now found yourself settled in that space.
I mean, I think when you bring up Vice now, it is also great to make that contrast of like Vice is a multimedia corporation, and at that point was pretty huge. Now I guess it's nothing, right? Because all of these places shut down also. I don't know how Vice is doing at this moment, but it was huge at that point. Like early 2010s, whatever, mid 2010s, it was
Mm-hmm.
huge. And they didn't pay me. They said exposure, like, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
get money from them. Where am I getting money from? It's the Refugee Women's Organization. And there's a different understanding of even value or how you treat people in these different spaces. And I think maybe it's that for me understanding that this is how it works, and I'm going to be treated differently, and my work is going to have different value in these different spaces that probably brought me to this point. Because what was I going to do looking for another job at another place like Vice, where I wouldn't get paid and the work conditions are horrific? And yeah, why would I continue working in those spaces? Also, in terms of like my values or like what I believe in, like, I'm not going to get that at a big corporation because I actually don't think big corporations should exist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Vice should exist technically or have that kind of influence in media. I think none of these big media corporations are even doing their job. So for me, um, yeah, I think this trajectory came out of just finding like-minded situations or people and being really lucky to find those people and have the opportunity to work with them.
That makes total sense. And it sounds really exciting for you that you get to continue to exist in these places. But do you ever worry about the money drying up?
Yeah, absolutely. I worry about it all the time. Like this week, I already had another freak out about like, oh my god, do I even have other jobs lined up? Where am I going to get money from? And particularly in this time, it's a really big concern for me because I have to renew my visa And to renew my visa, I have to always show a bank statement, and the bank statement should look really good. And right now, it looks like shit. So I have to be able to show that I have sufficient, like, I should first of all look like I'm generating something for their economy. And then I should look like I'm also self sufficient, that I would at no point require assistance from the German government, even though I think like I'm not even eligible for any kind of assistance from the government. But it's, yeah, I mean, technically, it's the position of the migrant worker is like you're needed, but you're actually also disposable.
Mm,
So I need to right now. I really am concerned about like having more money. And I do worry about like where am I going to find more work? But the work that I've also found so far, and it has been like 10 years, over 10 years of me freelancing, and I've really this whole like trajectory, this whole journey is all supported by word of mouth. And so I just kind of, yeah, depend on people reaching out to me with work. And it does happen. Like now I was freaking out, and then like someone I worked with, their partner is working on something and now wrote to me about wanting to work with me on that. So luckily, because I think I'm also working with people who are like in the same boat as me and kind of understand like also understand that we don't want to be working with corporations. There is more of a community and more of like we work with each other and we generate funds together to support
mm,
our projects and each other, and have like, and I think the hope, especially from this year onwards, that I'm really experiencing in the Berlin art scene in particular, is to have like self-sufficient communities, and to be able to have like a circular economy within ourselves, and support each other, because also funding now in Germany is a mess. And I think worldwide there's like this super right wing shift, which also means that funding for the arts and stuff is getting got all across.
yeah. Can you talk more about the right wing shift that's happening all over and how that is impacting your work and also probably your feeling of safety, not just in terms of financial wise, but also as an immigrant in a country that's not your birthplace?
Yeah, I think it's really intense in Germany, and I can particularly only speak about Berlin, but that's crazy because Berlin is supposed to be this like super leftist artist hub, and it's not, I guess. I think particularly from like last year, from October 7th, considering the the ongoing like genocide in Palestine, I think Germany's stance has been like really insane. And the shift towards this like right wing, it's not even a shift towards right wing because there is no left that even makes sense in Germany. You know, there is no sense. The German existence at this moment is one of denial and one of uh like really doubling down on a super anti like Muslim, like Islamophobic, anti-Arab, anti-immigrant, anti-refugee,
And
like
this is the left?
xenophobic,
Sorry.
racist. This is all over. So there is, I think, to be honest, no left, because the left is also supporting. The left is also super Zionist. The left is also denying that there is a genocide happening, and the German culture in general is a culture that is based on like just complete support of the state of Israel. So there is like very little room for reasoning with this. And in terms of arts, for example, there has been a huge like spree of cancellations, of funding, of awards, of like jobs, gigs, all across Germany, and particularly in Berlin. In Berlin, it's like really intense. There have been like huge prizes that were awarded to certain like writers or artists, and they've been revoked because the artist had some link to BDS. in the past. This is a huge thing in Germany. If you supported BDS, it's like basically you're fucked because
And what's
they
BDS?
BDS is the boycott, divest, and sanction like movement or way uh of resisting like the Zionist occupation
Uh,
of Palestinian land and the also the genocide. So if you, I mean, most actions that are against, that are pro-Palestine or that are saying, you know what, I think 14,000 children being murdered is wrong. Most actions that say something like that are considered anti-Semitic, and Germany is really, really kind of uh really obsessed with anti-Semitism in a way that is almost anti-Semitic. They, the people who also make these laws are actually not Jewish, and they will turn against Jewish artists and activists, to push these laws on anti-Semitism. It's really like this is, I don't know, it's like a cartoon almost. It's a yeah, a circus. So now, in terms of funding in Germany or in Berlin, earlier in the year, like in January, I think there was already this idea that from now on, the any funding that you would get from the cultural state, the the cultural department of the state of Berlin, you would have to sign an agreement that would say uh that you believe, it was basically, it was a definition of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, of what is anti-Semitism, and this is a really loose definition. Even the IHR itself, I think, claims that this is a loose working definition, and it's so open-ended that really, and for you to question the state of Israel is in a way anti-Semitic. So you would have to sign this definition and in a way say that like you support the state of Israel, which already, for example, Palestinian artists are in a bad position to
uh,
do that. But anyone else who believes that settler colonialism should not exist, or genocide should not exist is in a bad position because you can't get funding unless you agree to something that you don't believe in. So this clause was being put into this funding agreement, and there was a lot of uh, organized like resistance to this. There was a open petition that was signed by like I think over 4,000. I don't know actually, way more artists. And then this got paused, but now it's coming back, and worse than ever.
sorry,
Uh,
what got paused was the petition or the
this
having people
clause,
sign? Okay.
yeah, the inclusion of this clause got paused, and now it's back. So right now, I think funding, finances, even being in Berlin as a migrant artist, or even if you are like German, if you have German citizenship and you're pro-Palestinian, is so difficult, as an artist or as a person, as an activist, as a regular person also. There's so much police violence. If you, as someone on a visa like mine, are at a protest and then for no reason get, by the way, brutally arrested, there's never like a chill arrest, always a brutal
Um,
arrest by the police. But if you get arrested, then your stay here is like jeopardized, right? Like your uh visa situation is jeopardized. Yeah, I think it's crazy because Berlin, for example, I think just like any other major like cultural city, has gotten its um props, has gotten its like image through the work of migrant culture workers, through the labor that they invite all of these artists from other places for, because it's not going to happen just with white Germans alone. They need us, but
okay. So it does sound like you feel really settled into this niche because it aligns really, really strongly with your personal values.
yeah,
Um, I guess I feel a little bit concerned for you in the sense that you don't seem willing to take any money from bigger corporations who don't align with your values at all. And I think that's absolutely great. You shouldn't compromise. But I guess my gut instinct is, where's she going to get the money from? What if there's no more money?
Uh, I think I'm still in a more privileged position because I have somewhere to go back to. Um, and I mean, not that I'm like super thrilled about that idea, but if it was the case, it's not like my home is in active war zone at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in that case, I guess maybe that's why I don't feel so stressed about it. But I mean, I have friends who are from places that are active war zones. I have friends who don't have a place to go back to, and this is kind of the place they have right now. And I think there has to be, at least for us, there is some trust in this collective, uh, collective way of living and working, and there is hope that we like figure it out together. A lot of people were talking about leaving Berlin, and for me that was super stressful, especially like earlier in the year. Um, yeah, and I kept thinking, oh my god, everyone's going to leave, and I'm going to be here alone, and then how do I make this work?
Mm-hmm.
But also, a lot of people are leaving to figure out alternate locations and spaces and communities that can continue working together, that can find ways for us to continue working together. So maybe I don't feel so stressed about that now. And I want to say again, like, yeah, okay, this is like something that's related to my values, but also logistically speaking, I don't think if I was to sell out on my values, I would be in a much better place. Like, I remember
Yeah,
when
we
I was
talked
still in
about
Pakistan.
Vice not paying you.
Yeah,
So
exactly. When I was still in Pakistan, and then I was working now at this startup. And the startup was also like a cute place, whatever it was for education, and I got to do a lot of cute illustrations and stuff. It was still not a dream job by any means. And at one point, Coke Studio, which is like this music platform funded by Coca Cola in Pakistan, and it's huge. It's really huge in Pakistan and in South Asia in general. They had like an opening for a graphic designer. And of course, fuck Coca Cola. But at that point, I wasn't aware. Fuck Coca Cola, blood money. I went and I spoke to the people, and it was the people who ran the damn thing. These are the people, like the CEOs, you would say, right, of this project, who have an interview with me standing in the back room of some random building that they're renting out to have people work on this festival or whatever they were working on. And this guy is telling me, I'm like, okay, how much is it going to pay? And he tells me, oh, it's not about the money. If you're interested in the money, it's not about the money because this is a passion project. All of us here, from the
mm.
janitor to me, we're all here for the passion that we have for Coke Studio and for Coca Cola. It was
Meanwhile, is it about the passion for
insane.
the CEO who's making
Yeah.
millions of dollars?
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know about this janitor either, by the way. I don't know if I spoke to this person that they would agree with you, that they're here for their passion for Coca-Cola and Coke Studio. I think they're also here for a job. And by the way, you should be paying this person. You should be paying me. And you should stop paying yourself probably as much as you are, because that gives you the ignorance and the audacity to stand here and tell me this insane
It's
statement.
about the passion for Coca-Cola, Diet, Coke
Yeah,
Zero.
Coca Cola. This isn't even like a local cola brand or a local manufacturer or something. This is literally Coca Cola telling me this. It's insane. So, what am I going to do? Also, if I did work a job at a in a more secure place, something to also talk about if we're talking about Berlin and like funding and what's going on here in terms of like cancellations and stuff, all of the arts institutions which would have a more stable job for me are silent about what's going on. And if you say something, if you get caught saying something, you might lose your job. You might be like silent. And there is also, of course, like a self censorship culture as well within all of these institutions. You are already afraid to say something. But if you do, it's like it has to be so detached from the institution. How is your job safe in those places? Even if you decided, yeah, fuck it, I'll go work a job that pays me better at one of these institutions. I mean, the people that I know that are working in these institutions aren't having that great of a time either and are looking for alternatives because it's also, I just think at this point, considering the state of the world, and so not only Palestine, but yeah, okay, also Sudan, also Congo. If you just think about, fuck, also Balochistan, also Kashmir, if I just talk about my region, if you think about those things, there is just no way to justify working with an institution because the institution also doesn't give a fuck about you. Institutions are in it for themselves, and we, like, the whole idea is that we as workers are more valuable to them than they are to us. And even at a small scale, I've experienced that. Even in Berlin at a smaller scale, not working with institutions, but working in organizations that are meant to be more feminist or more decolonial or whatever. At the end of the day, if it is a collective that is not honestly invested in like the liberation of all of us and in the like in reparations and the equal distribution of resources, then they'll screw you over for themselves and for their name and for their like place, for their social capital, for yeah. So I mean, yeah, I guess it makes sense for you to be worried about me, but technically we should be worried about everyone because
Yeah, no, for sure. When you explain it that way, I'm like, okay, it that makes perfect sense. And it's true. I mean, I have friends who are also working at bigger corporations who feel unsupported, untaken care of while seeing their CEOs and people who work, I guess, levels above them take 5 vacations a year all around the world or own boats and things. So
yeah.
it does feel like we all just need to be taking care of each other, which you are actually out there doing, and I really commend you for that.
Yeah, I mean, not so much, but I think also like we do need to like I really want to join a union. And I've been talking to my friends about also joining a union. I think this is really
Like a
a time,
freelancers union.
yeah, like an arts union or a culture workers union.
Mm.
I don't think there is a freelancers union, but there is like an arts, there's like a greater workers union, and they have like a section that is for cultural or arts workers. Um, so I would want to join that. I think this is the time to like unionize. And yeah, I mean, when you introduced me and you said arts worker, this is something that is like a really a thing that has been, at least in conversation and dialogue, has been present within the art community in Berlin, that at least the people that I associate with, because the art community in Berlin, if I say that, is like really what everyone, I guess everyone's a DJ, everyone's got a radio, everyone's got
Everyone's a DJ.
yeah. I mean,
Can you
everyone's a
define
DJ
arts
is
worker
really,
for us?
yeah. So an arts worker, I would say, is like someone who works in the arts. And so it's not necessarily just people who are artist curators or like the gallery owner or the institution for arts, but also the people who work within the institutions as editors or proofreaders or the people putting up the art, like the art handlers, the people who work on applications for funding, the people who work on the publications, me as a designer for an arts institution, or even freelancing, especially because most of us are also freelancing because no, like, if especially in a more decolonial sphere of art, there aren't like major institutions necessarily. So you are freelancing between a few different places. And so I, as a freelance worker between a few different institutions, am also an arts worker. And I think the arts worker term is really important because it's important to understand that we are workers in the same sense that there are other people who are workers and laborers who are in more precarious situations because they're not in salary jobs. They don't get health insurance. They don't have um maybe insurance on the job if something happens on the job. And for art handlers, I mean, there have been accidents in projects that I've worked on for art handlers. It's not like you're plonking like a canvas on the wall, right? They're like these gigantic sculptural pieces that need to be installed. There are walls that have to be painted and repainted 1,000 times. There's like lighting that needs to be rigged. There are all these things. And if you have an accident, are you covered necessarily? No. We are in a way like daily wage workers also. And
Mm.
not to say that we are exactly, because also there is, by the way, like a huge amount of social capital that comes in the arts that makes you almost a different class from a working class person. At least you're perceived in that way, even though technically I would say a lot of us are working class because we are really dependent on the wages that we make from the little projects that we do that pay us very little, and then you collect all of it.
You're saying you're seen in a better way than
Yeah,
working
I think
class?
there's an idea where as an arts worker you aren't exactly considered working class. Or at least there is this perception, but I think there's also like part of working in art is not being perceived as working class. There's a desire in arts to seem that you are doing way better, or that you are somehow above working class because you are like educated in a certain way, or have taste in a certain way. But
Mm.
this is also all classist shit that comes with art, and art as a business and art as a market.
It's interesting how that comes into play because I totally see that in that as an arts worker, you're separate, quote unquote, from the working class because there's this bouginess almost to it when you're like it's like seems stylish, but it's really funny because in contrast, there's a term that we all know, which is the starving artist. So how
Yeah.
do you have both of those?
Yeah, exactly. And the starving artist is almost like a joke term, right? Because who is the starving artist? And it's also particular to the artist. It's particular to this
Right, not the art
singular
worker.
person who is like the artist, the genius, the creator, the one who like produces something. And then but we're also talking about the people around this like singular starving artist, because there are a lot of starving arts workers who help produce the work of the artist also. And I think, yeah, the idea of the starving artist is such a joke also, because I guess in any like art culture city there are people who are rich as fuck and who are artists, but they just pose
Yeah,
as if they're not.
they
So I think
cosplay as poor.
yeah, I think the starving artist idea belongs to them.
Yeah.
And the arts worker idea is like of the people who just actually have to make money to pay their insane health insurance or to pay the rent or whatever. I think also part of understanding that you're an arts worker is to understand that, yeah, we should unionize. You should have better conditions as workers. Uh, you should also understand that we have a responsibility as workers in the working class struggle, the same as other workers, as nurses or as like construction workers or dock workers or whatever. And so we also, the struggle of anti-imperialism, or the struggle of like against the genocide, or the struggle against colonialism is the struggle of the workers. And so how do we as artists or designers or DJs or proofreaders or writers or performance artists or whatever, how do we situate ourselves in that struggle as workers as well? What do we owe each other? How do we, yeah, organize as workers also?
I wonder if a lot of it is a struggle of visibility because when you're thinking of working class people, you know who can, or we know that there are construction workers, we know that there are plumbers, we know all those things
Mm-hmm.
exist. Many people outside of the arts do not know what an art handler is, or maybe they've heard the term proofreader, but they're not thinking about them. You don't see them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder if even like being able to marry the two, marry an arts worker into the working class image as well, it's just a matter of letting more people know that these things exist, like these people exist.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think also the term art worker for me would be something that is also just linked to that general idea that's like against white supremacy or capitalism that makes us think that like there's one great creator of something. Now I made it sound like God, but I mean I don't mean that. But also I guess I think it's monotheistic religion is also kind of selling the idea of like just one
Yeah, very
one
true.
being came up with all of this.
I mean, you can argue that religion right now is a like white supremacist idea.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I would. I mean, religion has been such a core part of so much
Hmm.
colonial moves. But back to the idea of like the single great artist, and usually a man, usually a white man. So I think the idea of the art worker is to expand that and say, by the way, like the single great work of art is not coming all by itself. By the way, Picasso stole shit, right? Like, come on. Like,
Yeah.
these are big artists stealing from other cultures, from other like artists who are not considered artists, who are just considered as like people like ethnographic studies, who were just producing little crafts for themselves. And then if a white man comes along and reproduces that in a bad way, then that's an artist. I think that is the resistance, and also saying that there are art workers uh who support the production of art as we know it. Like a museum is not just the artists that exist in there. I mean, even though a museum is such a horrible example, actually, I don't want to go with a museum and
Okay, we won't talk about
fuck
the museums.
museum. um, but yeah, there's so much work that is done by the archivists, by the librarians, by the teachers. Yeah, I mean, everyone who is producing for the final piece of art that you see. And I mean, this is also art that goes just into the market and then is sold at these insane, exorbitant rates to who? It just remains in the hands of like rich white families. It's just the whole business of art is insane. I think to say art workers is to say there is an idea of art that exists outside of the art market. There are people who are artists, but who also work in the arts. And that I think all art workers are potentially also maybe artists, or have the capacity to have been artists. I think to be an artist also requires a kind of funding, a kind of support that not everybody has. And a lot of people study to be maybe artists or to work in arts in a way where they would maybe also have the solo show instead of just being the one who's doing the art handling, but didn't have the like financial means to get there.
Hmm.
I would have studied fine art, by the way, in my undergrad if I had the money to study fine art, and I didn't because it cost so much money to study fine arts because you had to pay for like so many materials, and I couldn't afford that. So I didn't, and now I'm an art worker. I'm also an artist. I don't think all artists are art workers. I think that's a distinction that also artists make in terms of class, to always say that I am
Hmm.
separate from the person who has to produce my show. Um,
When like he that or not maybe he probably he likely he would not exist without the support of the art workers all around them, would not have their
exactly.
work
Who the
showing on
fuck
such
would
a grand
put up
scale.
your show if you, yeah, could you do it by yourself? No. Um, you actually couldn't.
That it's also interesting to think about how many people do refer to art as this very solo journey of something that you do have to do yourself. Like it's all coming from you, you're taking inspiration from the world, but it's just so all connected. And I I love just how many people you're shouting out. I mean, like the archivist is another person that many people who don't think about art have never heard of.
Yeah.
And there's so
Yeah.
many of these, not, I don't want to say little jobs, but it's like things that go into creating a much bigger thing that we see. And we don't get into the intricacies of how these things are coming to us because we're just seeing this art. And then right next to it, we're seeing the little placard with Smithy Van Smurgenmorgen.
Yeah,
So,
the one name. I think that's so insane. I mean, at least at the end of a film, you get the credits of who was on the crew. But
yeah.
what happens at an exhibition? I think it is about making. It's what you said. It's about making people visible. Because so many jobs are just completely invisibilized. For the sake of creating this idea of like this, yeah, singular genius who just had a vision, had a dream, had a vision, and produced something out of nothing. And it's not true at all. And I'm so glad to be working with so many people who have a complete understanding that all of our work is really in response to each other. Like if I do work that's on my own, if I make a comic, that is like, as I was saying, art for art's sake, and maybe not a design job that I'm doing for someone. But even if I do that, that's not coming from just me. It's coming from conversations that I have with my friends. It's coming
Mm-hmm.
from the things that we have done together, the spaces that we inhabit together. It's not. It's coming from a culture, a cultural and ancestral history of mine, and of the people that I'm in relation to. So I can't then sit and say, yeah, I just came up with that NBD.
Yeah.
It's just how my brain works.
That's really funny that you mentioned that because last night as I was walking home, I don't know why I was thinking about how you existing has changed the world because we're all so connected. So you whispering something to someone has led to them going to someone else, has led to them going to someone else, has led to all these things that have ultimately impacted the world in whatever way it is now. If you didn't exist, the world would be different. It could be better. We don't know. But everyone has this impact and we're all taking directly and indirectly from each other.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this like European or Western individualism that is so connected to white supremacy, that is so connected to capitalism, is something that absolutely has to be broken apart. And it has to be through the acknowledgement of just each other. I think also just in daily conversation, it's like a feminist practice, right? To quote your friends, credit your friends,
Mm-hmm.
these ideas that come to you aren't coming to you all by yourself.
I
Like,
mean, they do it in
even
the scientific papers and all they're always quoting their
Yeah,
friends.
and this is also how power is like condensed and collected, is that the people in power will just quote each other and quote the other people in power, but we also have the power to quote each other and to reference each other. I mean, even the idea of arts workers is something that's coming from conversations with friends and from the research and even work of friends, and from even talking and recognizing in each other or ourselves as a group as arts workers, and not just a freelancer, I guess, who shows up at art spaces.
What do you think are some very tangible steps that could be taken either by you or your community or the people that you work for or just the world? I know really a lot of different things I put out there. But what are some tangible steps that you think that could be taken to promote the visibility of the arts workers and highlight this so that people are gaining more respect and there's just a more empathetic outlook to this kind of like relationship?
I think there are different ways. Uh, so there's this collective in Berlin called Ferris Publishing Practices.
What is that?
Uh,
Ferris?
Ferris
How do you spell
Publishing,
that?
FEHRAS, link in bio. They do really cool work, and they have also been talking about art labor a lot. And something cool that they do is that when they're installing their work, they film the whole thing and then they present the film of them producing or installing the work as part of the installation. So
That is
you
super cool.
I don't think it's like exactly that, but at one of their recent like installations that was part of a group show, they had like a TV screen with like a full montage of them doing all sorts of art labor stuff from previous shows as well, and then also from this one where they're laying out the carpet and then putting in the books and the shelves or whatever, and like putting together the exhibition. I think part of it could be just that, recognizing your own labor as labor that needs to be seen outside of just the final product. And I think also then, yeah, I guess what I already said, referencing each other and acknowledging the labor of each other to have an exhibition and to list out also not just the artist and the curator, but the people who produced the exhibition or the people, there's also just so much, like we were just saying, or just discussing, there is so much art that happens through extractivism, through straight up stealing from another culture, or like from craftspeople, or from someone who does not have the social capital to end up in a gallery, to take it, to price it up, to make it yours, and then sell it in the art market, or in arts institutions. I think even the act of like pausing that and saying, wait a second, it's not because I got this piece from a craftsperson and then I put it in my exhibition as something else, that I can erase the existence of the person who produced this, or the culture that this came from, or
Mm.
the history that it comes from. It's also important to acknowledge that, to acknowledge your position, always in relation to others. I think is probably the best way. I think I think that is the best way to do it, because you can really mainly do something for yourself. Charity begins at home. I believe that if you want to make a change to something, you have to do it from yourself. So if I'm saying something, I think to acknowledge the people around me that create the space for me to think that thought, who support that thought, who had do it, who maybe came up with the thoughts before that led me to this thought. I think that in itself is a good space to start from. And then if everybody does that, which they want, but maybe
I
we have
do
to
really
have
like
hope.
that idea. I like what you were saying about the Ferris. Is that correct? The
Hmm.
Ferris Gallery doing the video, because I know when I'm
Publishing
in
practices.
publishing practices, when I'm in a gallery or a museum, I know you don't want to talk about them, and I see like a really large scale work, my thought is, well, I know they didn't do that on their own, and I am super
Mm,
curious as to how it was done, and I do think, and maybe this is just me, but the mystery almost makes me less interested. Like, I like to know everything that has gone into it, because I feel like that would make me personally appreciate it more. And you think about the artist statement, which I often like gloss over, because sometimes I'm like, this is not adding to the work for me. I think a lot of people are not great at writing artist statements, and sometimes there's kind of this thing where I'm like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay. But I do want to see how it was gone into it, because I think that from your hands to the creation and from the many hands, it to me makes it more meaningful and very
Hmm.
sweet. So I'm really interested in that now, and somehow we got to ship that idea to more galleries. Also, I was thinking about profit sharing. Is there anyone who does that? Is there any like artists or galleries can you think of that when an artist sells their work, that profit is also split amongst the people who did put up that work?
I don't know of any, but I do think that should be also. I think maybe in collectives that is more
Mm,
possible. There's potential that in certain artist collectives, this is how they do it. There's also something that I think requires like kind of trust to be built so that you work this way. But yeah, I think that is a really, I mean, I think that is how it should be. That that there is some kind of understanding of the collective labor, and I mean, just in like the most simple terms, like the whole idea of like capitalism is that it detaches the worker from the work, right? So I think to
mm,
always just be aware of like the fact that if something got done, someone did it. It didn't just happen. And to understand that the people who do this stuff also need, and it's not just about appreciation, by the way, it's about really material conditions. Like, I don't give a
yeah.
fuck about getting the credit for something if I don't get the also payment for it or the security for it. So
Hmm.
I think it is about uh I maybe it starts with naming someone, but then naming someone and saying, by the way, they also deserve a better payout for what they did, or they deserve to maybe have health insurance that is paid for somehow, uh or they deserve to have a meal when they're at work that they don't have to pay for. Um, yeah, I don't know what the
I love
question.
that you've just been dispelling so hard, like well, if you love it so much, you can do it for free, do it for the love of the art. You're like, actually, pay me also.
Yeah, I really don't. And I think when I came to Berlin, by the way, I was indoctrinated still in that mindset of if you love it so much, just do it, just make it work, and then somehow it will reward you. And I think, again, in working with particular people who were really clear about the fact that no, the work cannot happen if I can't pay my rent afterwards, like if I have to if I don't have enough money to feed myself, or forget about dire conditions, but also if you are able to pay your rent, if you are able to feed yourself, but still, if your work is not valued, then I'm not going to do it if the work isn't valued, because what is the point? What is the point of me doing it for Weiss or Coca-Cola for exposure? Where does exposure get me? Because it just means that we're all in this shit condition where we're all doing stuff for exposure and fighting each other for no money. We're fighting each other for nothing, basically, then.
Yeah,
It's
nothing pie.
insane. So I think it's really important that, yeah, it really isn't about the passion. It's about the really material conditions of workers. And as an arts worker, you have to be able to, you have to be able to have savings. You have to
Mm-hmm.
be able to have a vacation. What is the concept of vacation? Especially when you work freelance. It's like also when you work in the arts, it's like the idea of having time off is it's so crazy how arts is such a high pressure environment. The way that
Yeah,
I've
it's
pulled
art.
all nighters, the way that I've run around taking cabs, like you would think that I'm working for like, I don't know, like I'm I'm like the first responder or something for at a hospital, the way that I have to run around. I saw that yawn. I hope we're not using video.
I'm editing this out.
To be fair, I'm always yawning in the middle of people talking. Even if it's something that I'm super interested in, I'm just a tired person. I'm
It's
just a
fine.
fucking arts worker.
I
I
woke
don't
up
have
really early
time.
today so I could have time to like be outside and journal and stuff. But
Oh.
no, I love what you're saying.
Okay, but yeah, sorry. I'll just wrap this up. But just where was I even? Yeah, I was saying
or
that there's so much pressure in arts to do all of this stuff at like the most insane urgency with no money, with no support, whatever. And it's crazy because it's just art. I believe in the power of art a lot, and I do think that in terms of like a cultural soft power, it's like a really huge and important thing. But also it is just art. Like if the book isn't published in time, no one will
nobody
die.
dies.
Yeah, and I don't have to die to make it happen, by the way.
Hmm.
We could just, I think also, just in general in life, and put this in, don't edit this out, but I do think in general we need to have a degrowth mindset, all of
Oh,
us.
a
Like I
what? Say that
think
again.
like a degrowth mindset. So
What does that
de
mean?
growth. So instead of growing, to grow less, or not
Okay,
grow, to
interesting.
ungrow.
That is the
So instead
opposite
of
of what
always
everybody has been
expanding,
saying.
huh?
That is the opposite of what everybody's been saying. We've only been talking about growth mindset in the last few years.
Yeah, well, I think it has to be degrowth, and this is also not coming from me. This is coming from a lot of like feminist like writers and stuff, but also like people who are interested in like climate politics in particular. That is this particular, especially I think to, yeah, the climate crisis, is that there needs to be less growth, and we should be downsizing everything way more. So like there's it's not that we have to have like more electric cars. We should have no cars. That should be the place we're going to. Or we should have fewer cars. So it's not
Hmm.
the answer is not to produce more, it's to produce less. And I think even in the world of art, like the budgets that they have for exhibitions, you could produce less and you could re-budget that money towards the workers. It doesn't have to be starving artists and starving art workers. You could put, there is money and it could go towards those people. You just put most of the money towards this big production because it's a it's a fantasy you want to create, or it's a visual that you want to create about the fucking high end world of art. I don't know what it is, but for the aesthetic, and I don't think the aesthetic is as important as paying people.
Okay, so you hear that, everyone? Do less.
Do less. Everyone could do less. And I mean, what's the problem? Um, I don't think that's a bad thing to do. You have more time to do other things. Be slower. I don't believe in AI. I
Hmm.
think we shouldn't be becoming more proficient, more efficient, more like faster and better at doing things. I think we just need to do things slower. I'm so I don't know, such a boomer, I guess, with this.
Well, there's that book. Where is it? Somewhere. It's 10,000 hours. Is it weeks? Do you know the book? It's
No.
called Time Management for Mortals. 10,000 hours. Is there
Is
somewhere?
it probably it's 10,000 hours, right? Like the ten
Yeah,
thousand hours you
10,000 a
need
week seems
to
like crazy. 10,000 weeks, but it's like 10 hours.
353 billion dollars.
It's like it's 10,000 hours that you get in your lifetime, and in it, in the beginning, he talks about how humans are always trying to like hack for efficiency, hack for this, but it's like the more efficient you get, it just frees you up to do more work. Is what we're kind of like the mindset that we're in now. It's like, okay, like I want to manage my time better so I can get more stuff done, but why do you want to get so much stuff done? Shouldn't we be able
Yeah.
to manage our time better so we can, I don't know, like hang out?
Yeah. Also, all of the, it's like you do more work, and then all of the things that you could be doing to take care of yourself are also somehow produced now in a way where you are, like it is now just more work that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
so their
there's
self
so
care
much.
is now also work, of some kind that has to be achieved. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
I reject a little bit this self care thing. Everyone's like, make sure you make time for self care. How? Like, why do I
Yeah.
have to also make time for self care? And that's not to say that I don't take care of myself, but I can't say that I set aside this one specific thing to do regularly. Someone asked me the other day, oh, what do you do for self care? And I said, I paint my nails, which is true. I do. I just painted them again yesterday, but it's not
Yeah.
like a whole
Me
ritual I
too.
have, and that is something that just makes me feel good. Or
Yeah.
I
Like,
I journal in the mornings, which I almost don't see as a form of self care. I see it as a necessity at this point. Like if I don't, watch out, world.
yeah, I think that that's also, I guess what I mean is that like all of self-care has to be standardized into these like things that you can schedule into your day or whatever. It
Hmm.
it seems like these are like new boxes to tick. It's like I would like to have less boxes to tick actually, instead of now adding more to my to-do list, but it's actually supposed to be care for myself. Um,
Drink your water, stretch, go outside, take a bubble bath, um, do all these things. It can be a lot, and I feel like for some people that adds more stress. I did buy a wall calendar though recently, so I'm saying all these things, but I also am someone who is trying to get more things done.
yeah, I mean, I guess it's
But
really
it's the
hard
rat
to
race,
not
right? It's like
be.
it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to degrow in the way that I don't do so much work, but I have to. So I really want everyone to get on board so that we can collectively not do so much.
Yeah,
That's the dream.
I think that is a great message and dream to end on. Everybody do less, degrow, so Aziza can also do less, please.
Yeah, do it for me.
Think of Aziza. Aziza, thank you so much. This conversation has gone so many different places and we've talked about so many different things. And I'm
Yeah.
so happy. And I do want to say, interestingly enough, like this is almost the purpose of the podcast is to reference your friends, right? And the people that you
Hmm.
like I'm so happy to have these conversations and hear from you and other people that I don't get to talk to as frequently who are doing some very interesting and cool things and being able to hear it just straight from them. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And also, you're welcome. And also, thank you. I hope that I was able to push out my um anti-Germany propaganda as strongly as I would want
We're
to,
editing
because
that out.
I mean, of course, it is just a, of course, it's just one. I have anti-propaganda for all colonial
Not the US though,
places.
right? Never
No,
that.
actually, I was never. Long live America. Don't splice that. But yeah, but I think it's important to say if I am talking about artwork and artworking and blah blah that I'm doing it in Berlin right now, which is a horrible place to be doing artwork. But also
Oof.
don't take away my visa for saying that because I should have the right to criticize, um, especially when you've been a colonial power in the past and have not learned anything
You
from
tell
your
him.
own atrocities. Yeah. So
Well, thank you so much, Aziza, for talking with artists like us. It's been great to talk to an artist like you. Thanks for sitting down with artists like us. I'm Janita Richards, and I want you to be inspired by the life that's lived by you, because of you, and all around you. Are you our next guest? Submit yourself or a friend at cabbagehouse.xyz/artists like us. If you're feeling up to it, leave the show a review and share it with your friends. It means a lot. Stay sweet, sexy, silly, and inspired. I'll see you here next time with another guest just as interesting as the last. Hey, you might even know them. Ciao for now.